All right, I'm going to go over this contract as if you're my client. All right, so this is the OREF form. This is the OREF library. This is the one that most people are familiar with. The first thing that I would say is this first section talks about relationships. The first thing that you should know is that I, Heidi Hazel, work for Berkshire Hathaway, and I represent your best interest. The second part talks about Stephanie, and Stephanie represents the seller and the seller's best interest. What you should know in this contract is both of us work for Berkshire Hathaway. That means that our principal broker has a disclosed limited agency. She can see both sides of this transaction. She does have an ethical obligation to keep your confidential information between the two parties, but you do need to know that there is a disclosed limited agency for Heidi in this because she's Stephanie's principal broker as well. And do you understand the relationships, and do you have any questions on that? Okay, sign here. This next section, one thing that you need to note that this is legal and binding. It says here line 24. And if you don't understand anything that we're signing, or if you have questions at the end and you want to seek an attorney, you are invited to do that. Hopefully I'll be able to answer all your questions, but at any time you feel like you need to seek an attorney, you are welcome to do that. So Joe, we are offering to purchase from Magdalena in the county of Clackamas, the house at this property. And at this point, I would check the MLS listing to make sure that that matches up exactly. You're offering on this house a purchase price of $1,339,000. $15,000 of that is going to be earnest money. It's typical that we put 1% down on a transaction, and that's going to be your skin in the game. That's going to be your earnest money. What you need to know about the earnest money is it will sit in escrow, which is a neutral third party, until closing. It does count as part of your down payment. So this number, 15,000 and the 350,000 together are your down payment on this property. At closing, you're going to get a deed, and your loan amount is going to be $974,000. At this point, I probably would check their pre-approval letter and make sure this matches up what their lender is expecting them to see. I would also say, all right, buyer, do you have any questions on that? And if not, go ahead and put your initials here. This next section talks about fixtures. What you need to know about fixtures is fixtures are anything that is screwed to the wall, right? So in this room, the blinds are actually screwed to the wall. They are expected to stay, but the table in the room is not a fixture. It is a personal property that is expected to go. Anything that is screwed to the wall, which does not mean decorative pictures, but anything that is attached to the wall is a fixture and is expected to stay. That's true for plants in the yard as well. If there's a rose bush that they wanted to keep, we would need to exclude it at this point. But there's no exclusions on this property, so we're not going to ask for any exclusions on the fixtures. All fixtures needs to stay. Personal property is going to be washer and dryer, refrigerator, anything like that. A refrigerator is considered a personal property, and if we want that, we're going to put it in this line. It's a good practice to put as advertised or as seen on this date, and take a picture of it or get the make and model and put it there so they don't swap out the refrigerator, and just pay close attention to that, that ask, both if you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent. The balance of the purchase price, this next section talks about liquid funds. And what we need to do is we need to disclose any money that is not liquid in your account. Liquid means that it's sitting in your bank account right now and it's ready to be used. So if we need to pull money out of your 401k, or if you're getting a check, gift money from Auntie, we need to disclose that at this point. If there was a property that you need to close on in order to pay for the down payment, I need to know that now. We have to disclose it in this section here at the top. This is not a cash purchase, so we're going to skip that part. The balance of the purchase price is going to be financed. And the loan program that you're going to be using is a conventional loan. Now, it's really important that we attach that pre-approval letter with the offer. Otherwise, the listing agent is not going to take our offer seriously. So we will attach a pre-approval letter with the offer, and I will send it with them. We're going to have that pre-approval letter match the exact offer amount because we don't want to give any cards away. We don't want them to know that you qualify for a lot more than the offer. All right. This next section talks about financial contingencies. And one of the things is that if you cannot finance this property, if this property becomes unfinanceable, you will get your earnest money back. That 15,000 we put into escrow. If it doesn't appraise, the section talks about if the appraiser comes in below value, you do not have to purchase this home and you can get your earnest money back. Hopefully at that point, if there's a problem with the appraisal, we can negotiate it. But if we can't negotiate it, and we don't want to have to come up with extra money, you can get your earnest money back and we can terminate the transaction. All right, if something happens to the lender, you would get your earnest money back. If we have a problem with our financing, say something happens like someone loses a job, or someone dies, something terrible like that, if we are unable to get our financing, we're going to let the seller know right away within 2 business days, just to be fair so that they can move on and find another buyer who can purchase the property. This next section is really important because this is the buyer's obligations regarding financing. So at this section, I'm going to tell you that your lender is going to be very invasive with your finances. They are going to need to see your tax returns. They're going to need to see your bank statements. They're going to get very invasive in your personal finances. The good news is I, as your real estate agent, will not have to do that, but your lender will. And when he asks for things, you are agreeing to provide them to him on a timely manner. Do not feel like your lender is picking on you. He is required by law. We have very strict lending laws, and he is required to ask for those things. So please, when he asks you for something, please do it as quickly as possible. And in fact, you are agreeing to do so in this section. If you do not do things on a timely manner, your earnest money may be in jeopardy. And we may not be able to get that back if you don't finance. All right. You are going to apply for your loan right away within 2 business days and get the paperwork into the lender. This next section talks about seller carried finances. This doesn't apply. The seller is not giving you a loan on the property. That doesn't apply. So we're going to skip that. Property and casualty insurance. You are encouraged to right away go talk to your favorite insurance provider and check and see the cost on the home insurance for this property. It's good to do that right away so you know the real cost of your monthly payment. Flood insurance. This property is not in floodplain. That doesn't apply. Do you have any questions? If not, go ahead and initial here. At this section, it asks for additional financing provisions, for example, closing costs. So in this section, we're going to ask the seller to pay up to 1% of the sales price for buyer's closing costs, taxes, buy downs, and prepaids. You may also at this point instead maybe put an exact number, seller to pay up to $12,000 or whatever it is in buyer's closing costs. This next section talks about title insurance. The title insurance in the state of Oregon is provided by the seller, and what they're going to do is they're going to look and see if there are any liens, any codes, covenants, and restrictions that are attached to the property, any easements where somebody can access the property, typical things that you're going to see on that, or the electric company will have an easement to access the property. The water company is going to have an easement to access the property, but we're going to check and see if there's anything funny that's on title that we're not comfortable with. Some of the things that I have seen personally on title that were funny were child support that exceeded the amount that the buyer was bringing in, and we couldn't close because the seller owed more in child support than the house was worth. But all of these things are going to be taken care of from the title company, and the title company is going to make sure that when you receive the property, there will not be any liens against the property. So when we see the title report and the CC&R and the HOA documents, you're going to have 5 business days to review those documents and ask any questions of the title company. And if there's something on there that we can't have removed, we are going to be able to pull out and you're going to get your earnest money back. Okay. property inspections. Now, this section is really good for you to know because it tells you that me as your real estate agent are not the expert of all things. I know a lot, and I'm required to point out material defects about the property, but I am not a roofer, and I am not an HVAC person, and I am not the expert of all things. So we are encouraging you always to have an home inspection so that you know what you're purchasing. And we're going to do that here. So we are going to have a licensed professional inspector come and look at the home. And here we have to identify any invasive inspections. So typically an invasive inspection is going to be a radon report, a sewer scope, and a tank sweep. Now, you do not necessarily have to have all of these inspections, but we're going to talk to your inspector and decide which ones do you think you would like to have. If we put them in the contract, though, you're entitled to have them per the contract. If we leave them out, you will not have the opportunity to have them after the fact. So we are going to get all of that done within 7 business days. That means that we're going to hurry and do the inspections right away so that we might be able to negotiate any repairs that we might see. One thing you need to know about the inspection is the inspector is also not, does not know everything, right? They do not know all things. They are a general inspector. They may not be a roofer. They may say something looks funny with the roof, but they're not going to be able to say specifically. And at that point, they may tell you, you might want to have a professional roofer come out and take a look. And we're going to do that at that point. You're going to get a very long inspection report, and it's going to tell you everything that the inspector sees is wrong with the property. And that can be as minor as the doorbell all the way down to the foundation. They're going to crawl in the crawl space. They're going to crawl on the roof, and they're going to check every outlet and make sure that the property doesn't have any major defects that you do not want to take on as purchasing. But know that what we're going to do when we get that report is we're going to find some things that maybe are not going to allow you to finance the home. There may be some financial thing or some financing concerns for the lender that we're going to ask them to repair, or there may be some things that you just don't want to take on. And at that point, we are going to try and negotiate those. If we cannot negotiate those items with the seller, we are able to pull out within that 7 business days and you'll get your earnest money back. We are not waiving our inspection, and we're not waiving our inspection contingency. This property is not a private well. It's on the public water system, and it is not an on-site septic system. It is part of the public system. So that doesn't apply. This home is built before 1978, so there is a very good chance that there is lead-based paint in there. It's very typical in homes that are older than 1978. By federal law, the seller is required to give us a disclosure that says anything they know about lead-based paint. And then we will have 10 calendar days to review that and decide if we want to have inspections on the lead-based paint or not. Honestly, typically though, most sellers do not know for sure if there's lead-based paint in their home or not, and they may not have any reports on that. Okay, in the state of Oregon, the seller is required by law to provide a property disclosure statement. And that disclosure says everything that the seller knows about the property. Now, that doesn't mean that they've crawled in their crawl space recently or they've crawled in their roof. It is not the same as a home inspection, but they have to disclose everything that they do know about the property. When we get a copy of that, you are going to have 5 days to review it. And if there's something on there that we're uncomfortable with, we can pull out and you can get your earnest money back. Just know that this is not as good as a home inspection. This is only what the seller knows. Okay, this next section talks about what the seller does know about the property. This is a little bit redundant to the property disclosures that we're going to see, but we do know that it's connected to a public water system and it's connected to a public septic system, and that the seller has the right to sell the property. He doesn't know of any liens or anything or government agency violations in the zoning. This is all disclosures that the seller has seen. However, the seller hasn't seen this report yet, or he hasn't seen this offer yet. So the seller is going to take a look at that. And if some of these statements or one of these statements is not true, they are going to let us know right away, writing, if there's a problem. Okay. This property is to be purchased as is. All properties are as is when they close. So we're going to do our best to have our inspections and find out all the defects about the property. But if you move into the house and the very next day the furnace stops working, you own a furnace that's no longer working. So you just need to be aware of that. We will not be able to ask the seller at that point to come take care of the furnace. This next section is all capital letters because this is right out of our Oregon statute. And this says that the property needs to be zoned properly and be for legal uses. So we're not going to buy a residential property for commercial use and vice versa. And it's in the fire district, etc. Homeowners, this property does not have a homeowners association. If it did, we would have another addendum we have to attach. And this one doesn't have an alarm system. So any questions on that? If not, go ahead and initial here. Smoke and carbon detectors. In the state of Oregon, by law, the seller, when they transfer property, they have to put smoke detectors and CO detectors that are no older than 10 years old. So we're going to want the seller to take care of those right away so that once our appraisal comes out, the appraiser is going to look for that as well. And we don't want to have to pay for another of the appraiser to come out twice. So we're going to ask the seller to make sure that everything is up to date right away within 5 business days of us going under contract. There are not any smart home features in this property. Smart home features would be like a Nest thermostat or a Ring doorbell. Those are smart home features. This property didn't have any. If they did, we would ask the seller to provide instructions on how to get those set up in your name. This does not have a wood burning stove or insert. In Oregon, by law, if it did, we would have to make sure that that wood stove or wood burning insert was certified. And if it was not certified by law, they would have to remove it and destroy it. But this one doesn't include one, so we're going to say no there. We're not asking for a home warranty in this case because we're competitive, and we're not asking for anything else. Some of the things that you might put in this part provisions would be an escalation clause, or, you know, if it was a cash offer and you were asking for the couch, you might put it there. But in this case, we're not asking for anything else. Escrow is going to be within Ticor title. Escrow is a neutral third party. So they're going to hold the earnest money in there and they're going to take our instructions and transfer title when the time comes. Prorations of taxes are going to be the closing date. So in the state of Oregon, our tax year is on fiscal year, which means it starts July 1. However, most people do not get their bill. Well, we don't get our bill until about November. So I just want you to know that you're only going to pay for the taxes while you're in the house. And in this case, we're going to close in June. So you're really only going to be paying for about a half a month of taxes. And the seller is going to be paying for their share. Since the seller has already paid their taxes for the entire year, we are going to reimburse them for the part of the year that you're in the house, which will just be that little half of a month. So the seller is going to pay all the utilities on the property. You are not going to get any utility bills that you did not spend. So if there were fuel, heating fuel, or propane, we would pay them back. There's not in this case. Earnest money. So again, the earnest money is going to go to escrow, and that's our neutral third party. We need to do that within 3 business days. So that means that if the seller signs this on Friday, we have to have that earnest money in escrow by Wednesday. And I'm going to connect you with that, but we do not want to be late on that. We need to for sure get it in within 3 business days. And it's going to go directly into escrow. I'm not going to hold it. If you understand all of that, that's great. Initial here. Okay, earnest money again is going to be deposited directly into escrow. You get your earnest money back for all the reasons I've already stated. So if we can't negotiate repairs, if there's something on title that doesn't look right, if there's something on the closing disclosure that doesn't look right, or you don't finance the property, you are going to be able to get your earnest money back. You are not going to get your earnest money back if you change your mind at the last second, or if you fail to do your financing properly. or if you go buy a boat at the very last minute and you ruin your finances because of that, the earnest money is going to go to the seller, and that is what's fair. We've tied up the property for that long. Okay. Closing is going to occur, in this case, on or before June 28th. Now, closing is when you own the property. It's when you title it in your name. You need to know that that is not the same as signing day. We're probably going to sign a few days before closing, if not a day before. Okay, the closing disclosure. This is a federal law, and what it states is that when you go and apply for your loan, your lender is going to give you the cost of money. They're going to give you a statement and says, this is how much money it's going to cost to borrow money from our institution. At the end, they're going to give us a closing disclosure, and it's sometimes called a CD, and that has to match. And this helps protect you against a bait and switch situation where the lender says, okay, this is how much it's going to cost for you to get a loan. And at the end, they say, oh, now it's going to cost you another $5,000 to borrow money. You got to come up with that. So these things have to match. And by federal law, once you get that closing disclosure, you're not allowed to sign for 3 business days after. So we're going to watch for that closing disclosure at the end and make sure that we acknowledge it so that our timeline can get started. Deed. The seller is going to make sure that you get a clean deed. That means there's not going to be any loans again when you get it. Okay. Possession is going to be by 5 o'clock at closing. There are no tenants in it. That's the day that we actually own the property and it's actually in your name. Again, not signing day, but closing day. We're not going to give them possession after closing, and you're not going to move in before closing. It's best that you're in the house when you own it and they're in the house when they own it. This next section talks about taxes. If the seller did not pay their taxes, or if they are not an Oregon resident, there may be some additional withholdings that the escrow company is going to take to make sure that their taxes are paid. This isn't going to affect you because you're going to get clean title and you're not going to be paying for taxes that the seller owes. This is not a 1031 exchange property, and it's not specially assessed. Typically, specially assessed property are going to be those farm forest deferrals or maybe a VA exemption that would be specially assessed. If you sign all that, go ahead and initial there. It's not a historical property, so that doesn't apply. So this next section just talks about definitions within the contract itself. So one of the few things that you need to be sure and note is a business day. All of our timelines are going to be on a business day other than that lead-based paint disclosure, which means a business day is Monday through Friday and not holidays. So if it's a federal holiday or an Oregon holiday, it doesn't count as a business day. The other thing that you need to know is that the seller is not necessarily going to sign the same document. We're going to use electronic signatures, and our timelines start after the seller delivers the signed document back to us. Time is of the essence in this agreement. That means that if we receive an addendum from the other side, we are going to, within a reasonable time, get that back to the other side. We're going to schedule our inspections in a timely manner. We're kind of do everything as quickly as we possibly can for the transaction. Okay. Time zones may differ. The seller might be in another state, but the time zone that we're going to use for this contract is going to be where the property is located. Okay. This next section talks about arguments. If we were to get in an argument, either me and you and the seller, you and the seller's agent, this is the way that we're going to go about that. I will tell you that we will hopefully resolve any arguments that we have before any of these things come into effect. Do you understand all of that? Great, sign there. This is where you're putting your name on the line. So this is where you're offering to purchase. And the deed or contract will be prepared in the name of. Is your name spelled right? Is this how you want it to appear on the deed? Great. And we're going to only give them 24 hours to review this offer. So here's the date. They need to respond to us by 6 o'clock on the offer deadline. All right, and this next section just is a chance for the seller to either agree to our offer as it is written, or to counter it and make some changes to it, or just reject it, and we'll wait for that. And that's it. Go ahead and sign here.